So we're continuing our study today in James. So if you have your Bible with you, open it please to James chapter 2, and we're in verses 14 to 26. Now, James has been teaching us a lot about authentic Christian living the past few weeks, and he's been challenging us in quite a few ways. James doesn't exactly hold back in the language that he uses in his book. And that's a good thing, because as Christians, we need to constantly be challenged in our walk in life. And in case you were wondering if today was going to be an easy sermon or that James was going to be letting up in any way whatsoever, sadly, that's not the case. James does not let up at all, unfortunately. And we're going to see that in our very first verse. So today's sermon looks to answer the question, what does a Christian with a living faith look like? What does a Christian with a living faith look like? Okay. So if you'd like to join me, we'll start reading the passage from verse 14. Okay. What use is it, my brethren, if someone says he has faith, but he has no works? Can that faith save him? And I just want to pause there for a second. James is not opening this up to theological debate. He's not addressing us with a question where he says, my brethren, if someone says that he has faith but has no works, can that faith save him? Let's discuss. No. James is asking a rhetorical question. So when James says, what use is it, my brethren, if someone says he has faith and has no works, can that faith save him? The answer is a resounding no. Thank you. Wow, you left me hanging there. We've got a live stream and everything, and just, yep. Okay. Yep. All right, so we'll continue into verse 15. If a brother or sister is without clothing and in need of daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and be filled, and yet you do not give them what is necessary for their body, what use is that? Even so, faith, if it has no works, is dead, being by itself. But someone may well say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without the works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that God is one. You do well. The demons also believe and shudder. But are you willing to recognize, you foolish fellow, that faith without works is useless? Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered up Isaac, his son, on the altar? You see, the faith was working with his works, and as a result of the works, faith was perfected, and the scripture was fulfilled, which says, and Abraham believed in God, and he was reckoned to him as righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. You see that a man is justified by works and not by faith alone. In the same way, was not Rahab, the harlot, also justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? For just as the body without the spirit is dead, so also faith without works is dead. He doesn't hold back. He doesn't hold back at all. 2 weeks ago, he told us that religion was worthless without relationship with Jesus Christ. Now he's saying a confession of faith without relationship is dead. He says in verses 15 and 26, essentially this. This is the easiest way to sum it up. Show me your relationship with Jesus apart from your works, and I will show you my relationship with Jesus through my works. And Jesus already highlighted this to us 2 weeks ago when we looked at that passage in chapter 7 on the Sermon on the Mount. He says to us when he gets to the end, it's not about saying these are all the things that I've done, and I even did them in your name. If he looks at you and says, I don't know you, I don't have a relationship with you, as the passage tells us, we're in serious trouble. When he goes on and says, you believe that God is one, you do well. The demons also believe. Again, it's more than a confession of faith. It's more than religion. It's about a relationship. Demons confess that Jesus Christ is real. They'll shudder if he comes before them. We see this in the gospel message. A possessed man with a demon inside of him sees Jesus and shudders because he thinks, that's it, I'm done for. There's the Son of God before me. Even they're aware that the day is going to come when he will turn to the earth and set it all right. That demon thought that was the time. But that demon doesn't have a relationship with Jesus Christ. When he gives us our example with Abraham, he said, and Abraham believed God, and he was reckoned to him as righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. Friendship is a relationship. He was a friend of God. Abraham was said to then have had a relationship with God, displayed not just because he had a confession of faith, but because his relationship was displayed by his works at the altar with his son Isaac. James is actually giving us some very decent psychology here. And you can kind of picture it like this. I have a little circle, and in that little circle is what I value. And a bigger circle goes around that circle, and that circle is what I believe. And another circle comes out of that, which is my behaviors or my actions. Now, I'm going to give you a very classic example. And somebody is probably going to come to your mind when I give you this example. And this is the one. I'm going to give the example of a perfectionist. So a perfectionist will value things being done to a high standard. A perfectionist will value things being done the way that they think they should be done. And this can then transfer into a belief. And that belief is that all things should be done to a high standard by everybody. That all things should be done the way I think they should be done. And then this manifests itself in its actions. You'll see this person working really, really hard. They'll be working overtime. They'll be putting in more than any of their peers. They will check, double check, triple check everything that they do. But more importantly, because of their belief structure, their behaviors towards others will be influenced. Maybe they'll butt heads with people who maybe they don't work as hard as they do. They don't live up to the standards that this person sets. That's the example of a value, belief, action circle for a perfectionist. And when I said perfectionist, there's probably no doubt that in your mind came an image of certain people in your life. You know, in fact, I even know that my wife might have even come up with the idea of me in her head.
Of course.
Okay. That's how powerful an example is of when you look at somebody and say, look, I can see your values, I can see your belief, and it's manifesting in your behavior. And a perfectionist is a very clear example of that. Let's go to another example. Let's look at a vegan. Now, little circle, bigger circle, bigger circle. So a vegan values animal life, okay? And they value it to a really high standard. They may even value it to the same standard as human life, okay? And because of their value, they have a belief like, animals deserve to not be caged up. They need to be free. They don't need to be enclosed together and treated poorly. They have rights. They have feelings. They're living beings. And then this changes their morals and their ethics to the point where they say, I shouldn't eat animal products anymore. I don't feel that that's right. And that'll transfer into their actions and their behaviors, and they won't actually eat animal products. But what is so interesting about this viewpoint is that there's a cycle that goes back, and their actions influence their values further. So a vegan who has sworn off animal products and is living that life, they might start to feel healthier. They might start to have more energy. So then other values start to come in. I value my vegan diet because it makes me feel healthier. Belief might change again. They might say, vegan lifestyle is not just morally and ethically good, but it's also healthier. It makes people feel better. Their actions then change. I'm going to tell everybody else about my vegan lifestyle. I'm going to tell everybody else about what's so good about, living a vegan diet. I'm going to tell everybody else about, the moral and ethical issues of the mistreatment of animals. I'm going to go around and share that with people. And another psychological thing that's useful is let's put the vegan on this side of the room, okay? And now let's be an external viewer, a meat eater, okay? The meat eater can look at the vegan and they can say, wow, I can see how your belief and your values about animals has changed the way that you live. I can see the improvement it's made both in yourself and in your life. It's made you healthier. I can see all the benefits. But I really like meat. But at least I can see you living it out. At least I can see your morals and ethics on display in your behaviors and in your actions. Kudos to you. I respect that. But I'm sorry, not for me. I like meat. The other option is to actually make a conversion. And the meat eater goes, wow, that was pretty powerful stuff. What you're telling me is just, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And I can see just for your passion, for your life, how you live. I can see how important that is to you. And you've made that important to me too. And I'm not going to eat animal products anymore either. I'm going to become vegan. Let's go to a third example. And if you've been tracking with me, you might actually already have a winkling of an idea as to what the third example is going to be. Let's have a look at a Christian. So values. I value not being judged by God. I value being saved by my sin. I value having a relationship with God. I value being loved. I value being shown mercy. I believe that Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. I'm going to give my life to him. I'm going to go to church. I'm going to read my Bible. I might even serve, do some ministry, attend a Bible study group. Read my Bible today. Got challenged. Pornography's bad. Stealing's bad. Lying's bad. Adultery's bad. Murder's bad. I'm not going to do those things anymore. I'm And I feel that they're right. Hopefully at this point there's a change in behavior. There's something that backs up this constant circle of walking with God and that changes our behaviors. So let's just pause for a minute and think about an external viewer looking at a Christian. Let's keep the Christian where he is over there. Let's pretend we're external viewer. But let's up the ante on the external viewer. Let's go Francis Chan level external viewer. And we've talked about this a couple of times. Let's make the external viewer somebody who's on a desert island. They've never met a Christian before in their whole entire life. This is all they've got with them, the Bible, the Word of God. They read it cover to cover. They come to a conclusion about what a Christian looks like. But let's go even further. What would they say a Christian would value? What would they say a Christian believes? What would their behaviors of a Christian look like if that was indeed what they valued and what they believed? The example I've just given you is sadly what most Christians look like, but it's not an example of what a Christian here looks like, because I didn't have my example actively having a relationship with Jesus Christ or actively living it out in their life. They were just doing Christian-y stuff, religious stuff, which James told us 2 weeks ago is worthless. Nowhere in my example did I mention him walking with Jesus, and nowhere in my example did I have a relationship with Jesus. All I had was a confession of faith, a series of actions. That is what we all think a Christian looks like, and they're just running around in a circle. God's not even in that circle. He was nowhere to be seen. I didn't put him in there yet. So let's put him in there. So I've already said that there's a little circle value, and now that is a bigger circle called belief, and now that is a bigger circle called action. But what drives that, unlike a perfectionist and a vegan, isn't some kind of own self-values and beliefs and behaviors, and they're reinforcing each other. There's something even bigger. God. God's values, God's beliefs, God's actions. And we have them all documented here because Jesus walked the earth, thankfully, for 3 years and gave us examples of how we should live our life. He gave us examples of what we should do and how we should behave with those around us and how we should treat them. It's all documented right here, including all of the parables, which you won't get very far in Matthew, the very first book of the New Testament, which tell us about what Jesus feels about when we don't actually go off and do these things and the language that he uses. He gives the example of, if you don't feed someone who needs food, or if you don't give water to someone who's thirsty, you didn't do it for me. If you thought James was harsh, the words of Jesus are even harsher. So this is what it's supposed to look like. And we've been highlighting this the last few weeks. The mindset has to be that we are walking with Jesus Christ, that as if he is right here beside us, living next to us, moment by moment, breathing the same air, following his example. Our mindset has to be, he is my master, I am his bondservant. He provides me with everything that I need. Not everything that I want, but everything that I need. And I'm okay with that. He's showing me love. He's showing me mercy. He died on the cross so that I could be forgiven of my sins and made perfect in the eyes of God. His ways are my ways. He tells me that he is my treasure. I treat him as my treasure. He is more important to me than anything else in my life. I live my life as Jesus is everything my heart desires, not Jesus is everything, Jesus plus everything my heart desires. And I'm walking together with him in relationship, and we're going down that beautiful path of righteousness right to the very end. Whereas James says we'll be crowned in glory. And hopefully, as he says here and in the New Testament, when we have a relationship with him, we maintain it, he will look at us in the eye at the end and say, well done, good and faithful servant. I knew you. Come on in. We've been talking about this for the last few weeks. It's all about the relationship. James has highlighted for us, it's not about the religious-y stuff that we do. That's worthless. He says it's not about the confession, because the confession about the relationship is dead. If a Christian goes along in life, in my first example, and the external viewer looks at them and they don't see a change in their behavior, their actions don't look anything like this, do you know what they look like? They look like a vegan who eats meat. Because a vegan who eats meat doesn't stand by their moral, ethical convictions. Their behaviors don't match what they sprout from their mouth, that they believe and that they value. And the word for that is a hypocrite. And sadly, Christians are very good at looking like hypocrites. In fact, we've been called that by non-Christians for that very reason, because we don't look like what it looks like in here. We don't look like someone who has a living, breathing Jesus Christ walking next to them in their life, influencing their actions, then living out the way that they live. Their values are the same as his values. Their beliefs are the same as his beliefs. Their behaviors are the same as his behaviors. You can see the influence. So what does a Christian with a living faith look like? We've highlighted it quite a bit already. A Christian with a living faith doesn't just have their own values, their own beliefs, their own actions. And they're not just reinforcing them over and over again. Value, belief, action, changing my values, beliefs, actions. There's an overarching circle. God. And it's actually God's values that are changing them. It's God's beliefs that are changing them. And it's God's behaviors that are changing them. And they're living that out in their life, their works, their behaviors. They're living it out. It's on display to all who sees it. Now, Christian with a living faith, it should be so real, it's almost as if they can see Jesus in your life. And we're so good in our lives about talking about all the things that we love. We're so good about talking about the television show that we watch that we love, the latest episode, the book that we've read, the holiday that we've been on, people in our lives that we love. I mean, I talk about my wife, Sarah, all the time, much to her shock, I guess. Yeah, exactly. Okay. But if somebody was to walk into my house and see Sarah on the couch, they'd be like, there's a living, breathing Sarah. Wow, she's real. It should be the same when they look at us. There's a living, breathing Jesus, completely changing your values and beliefs and behaviors, and wow, you're living it out. He's there. And just like we did with the vegan example, the external viewer should be able to see that. The person who comes off the desert island should be able to see that. They should be able to find Christians that look like that. And they should at least, like the meat eater example, get to the point where they go, wow, I can see the impact that Jesus has had in your life. I can see that you value him above all else. You can see the treasure that he is. I can see how this influences your belief, how it influences the faith that you have in him. I can see you living that out. I can see the contentment. I can see the way it changes your behavior and your actions and the way that you talk, the way the things that you don't say, the things that you do, and the things that you don't do. I can see a difference in your life. And like the meat eater, they should then be able to make a choice. The choice can be, wow, I can see you living it out. It's real. Yep, not for me. And sadly, I've been there, and this haunts me. I evangelized to my best friend once, and he got all the way to the point of understanding the whole entire thing and seeing it. And he said to me, I'm not ready to give control of my life over to God. I'm not ready for Jesus Christ to influence my life and change me. I want to continue living the way that I'm living. But at least in that situation, they could see a living, breathing Jesus Christ. I would take that over the non-Christian looking at me and saying, I can't see it. You're a hypocrite. What you believe, what you value, what you hold up in esteem, I can't see it in your life. Because at least if they can see it, like in the meat eater example, they might actually go, wow, he's real. He's made a huge change to your life, a massive change. I want that. Tell me more. Open up the Bible with me. Share it with me. Talk to me. Tell me more about Jesus and the change that he's made in his life. And I've highlighted this example before, and it's a powerful example. D.A. Carson is a very, very good theologian, very hi-fi in his technical commentaries. And when he was going through university, every semester, he would find a non-Christian and he would say to them, okay, look at how I lived my life. Spend time with me, and then at the end, tell me if you see Jesus. You know what happened? Every single one of them came to know Jesus. Such was the example of Jesus Christ living out in D.A. Carson. It could not be seen. There was such a living faith. It was as if he was standing beside him in his walk. It was undisputable. It could be seen by all the non-Christians that came in and lived with him. And that example just sits with me my whole life. It's a very powerful example. James asked us a couple of weeks ago to not be someone who looks in the mirror and then forgets who they are. And when I read this passage and was preparing this sermon, there were some hard times looking in the mirror at the eyes that stood back at me, asking the question, how am I going in my walk with Jesus? How am I going? Can people see it? Or have I still got some things there that, potentially blinding people? Have I got some of my own values and beliefs and behaviors that, I need to give over to God more? I need to let him change. I need to bring him closer to me, closer and closer and closer in my walk, that he's actually like there in my mind all the time, challenging me, thinking, constantly thinking about him. The example I gave last week of, we're walking together and then it's like, let's go talk over that person over there. And then you find out they're not a Christian. And then you look at Jesus like, they don't know you? And our behavior should be changed because we should be loving others the way that he loves them. If we see a non-Christian, we should break our hearts the way that it breaks Jesus' heart. Because that's how much he values them. He values them enough to die on the cross for them, to shed blood for them, so they can be made perfect in the eyes of God. That should change our behaviors. It should change our actions and how we interact with people. So not only is the application for today that perhaps we should all take a hard look in the mirror as Christians and say, where are we at in our walk with Jesus? What's my value, belief, action circles look like? Is God even on the outside of them, changing me? Or am I kind of just going on my own little way, walking up and down, and none of his values, none of his beliefs, none of his actions are influencing me at all. I'm just living by myself. That's application number one. Application number two is that we are a church plant. And I say this a lot. We are trying to grow our numbers. And if there's ever been a time, it is now to go out into the world and show people a living, breathing Jesus Christ that we are walking with, to bring them into our lives, to make relationships with people, to make new friends, to show them a living, breathing Jesus Christ, to at least give them the opportunity to be the external viewer and make that decision of, I can see the impact that he's had on your life. But it's not for me. Or better yet, and this is our prayer, isn't it? That they would look at us and go, wow, I can see the change that he's made in your life. I want in. Tell me more. Read the Bible with me. Open up the scriptures. Tell me how he's changed your life. Tell me about your walk with him. Tell me how he's got you through suffering. Tell me how you've persevered with him in trial. Tell me how he's been a part of your life, because I want that too.